Awesome. So I'm going to start recording just because if I don't start recording early on, I miss some great conversation. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah,
it started earlier and stuff. So you live on a military base?
I do.
Uh, who's in the military?
My spouse is, my husband is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually what got me into code, weirdly enough. I'm trained as a music teacher, actually,
Okay.
and trying to be able to continue my teaching career as a military spouse, I found just wasn't possible.
Mm.
And so I was looking around for things to do. I was working as a clerk, and one of the guys in his previous command actually, he's trained in cybersecurity, and he's also a mentor for Operation Code. And he said, you should give this a try. Get on freecodecamp.com and try out their curriculum. And I started going through their HTML portion of their course, and I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, you mean I get paid to do this stuff? And so it
Exactly.
went downhill from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good reaction. That's a good sign that it's gonna stick and you're gonna love it a lot. That's great. And so now, did you just start the General Assembly immersive camp? Is that what you're doing now?
Actually, I am supposed to graduate in August. August 8th is my last day.
Okay, I was confused because I saw your job update the other day, but you just updated it a little late, is what happened, I suppose.
I
That's
did.
okay. So you're beyond HTML and CSS by now, in other words.
Definitely. Although it seems with CSS, there's always something more to learn.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, when I first went through it, I thought, oh, this is kind of easy and kind of boring or whatever. But it's not. There's just too many things that you can learn. But you just continue picking up stuff basically as you go. Um,
Definitely.
so you reached out to me so at this point in your journey, what kind of questions or what would be helpful for you to talk about, basically?
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple of things written down. I know you're like pretty much self-taught, aren't you?
Yes, yes. I would say that everyone's self-taught, and
That's a good way to put it.
yeah, because on the one hand, we all need to find teachers and we all need to find resources and such, but on the other hand, we all have to figure out how to understand it on our own too. So yeah, it's kind of both, but
Yeah, definitely. I was kind of curious to learn a little more about you. Like, I've seen a few of your videos and I've got to play catch up a bit, but like what got you into this field in the first
well,
place?
it's so funny because as you were telling your story, I was making connections like, whoa, there's some connections here. My both my mom and my sister are software engineers, and my mom started out as a music teacher. She
That's
and now
awesome.
she's a retired, like she was a software engineer for 22 years and now she's retired. And so there must be some kind of connection there between music and, I mean, there is a lot of math and a lot of patterns and different things in music. I'm sure you could talk more eloquently about it than I could, but yeah, there's certain parts of the brain that do the same things there. So that was funny. And then the other connection I made was the military thing. Like I think it was well, my dad was in the military, so he's like a super science nerd guy. He was in the Air Force, that branch of the military, So um and then a couple years ago my husband was looking to switch careers. What he was doing wasn't supporting us very well, so we looked into the military, and he took the ASVAB and he got the highest score. And
Ooh.
so I know he like was studying, he was studying for it like the night before, and I looked over his shoulder and he was doing some kind of algebra problem, and I said, let me do it. you know Let me solve for X. And I've been a stay-at-home mom for like 10 years or something now, and at that moment, I realized that my brain had been so bored, you know? I mean, I
Hmm.
hadn't been bored because I've been super busy all the
Yeah.
time, but my brain had not done anything challenging since college, basically. And I used to just thrive off of uh, book clubs and problem solving and all sorts of things, and I hadn't been able to do that much. So the way I basically entertain myself as a mom is analyzing our house setup and rearranging the furniture. But I haven't rearranged the furniture since I started coding. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
um, but anyway, so he took the ASVAB, and a lot of the recommended careers for him in the Air Force, cybersecurity was one of them. And another one was like, what is it where they're translating foreign languages or so, anyway.
Oh yeah.
But we were looking for something that was translatable into civilian life, like after the military. And when we saw what cybersecurity people make every year, like there's a reason the military can't hold on to cybersecurity people. Like they make way too much in the civilian life.
Yes.
And that got us thinking about computers and software and programming. And at the time, like I was interested in it, but the kids were still super young. And my husband actually tried staying at home with them for a few days while I went off to study, and it almost like killed him. So I said, okay, why don't you go first then? So he ended up going to a boot camp and getting a job. And that's when I started teaching myself after we settled a little bit. So that's my story. And it's funny that there were those similarities with
Yeah,
yours.
definitely. That's awesome.
Yep.
I actually I started kind of looking into coding in 2017, and I was working my way. I was trying to become self-taught as quickly as I could. But I found like I've got my friend who got me started wasn't always available to chat, and there's like, as far as I know, nobody in my family close to me who would be able to talk about this sort of thing. And so I got a little lost in the rabbit hole of what language should I be learning and how do I go about this. And then when you decide on that language, there's just so many different paths you could take. I got a little bogged down trying to keep focused. How did you start your learning process, and how did you kind of stay strong? And like, which
Well,
language did you start learning?
yeah, well, when I first started, I got a book from the library on Java for Dummies.
Nice.
But that was back before, like before Nat got into it. So I just put it on hold, Nat's my husband. But then basically looking at boot camps and the curriculums that they do, like the languages that they do, I did some research. I did some research, like how to break into tech, how to, and JavaScript and web development was suggested as a much easier thing to get into, as something to get into more quickly. Like if I wanted to be a Java developer, I would have, I mean, from what I read anyway, it would have taken me years to get good enough to be employable, is what I read. I don't know if that's true. Who knows? But yeah, web development was being pushed a lot, though, as something easy to break into, very high in demand. So I switched to web development, and that's what Nat got into for the same reason, and all the boot camps are doing it and everything. It did help that he went first.
Yeah.
I have someone to talk to and ask. Like, he wasn't the most patient teacher, so I only asked him as like a last resort. But that's okay. He was still there for me if I needed him. But for the most part, I was very active on LinkedIn and also going to meetups before the lockdown, obviously. And that really helped, being able to talk to other developers in that way. And I could share my code with them or my struggles, and they give great suggestions about what to learn. So I was going through like the free code camp, and I was struggling with Redux, and a lot of developers were saying, just learn hooks first. And I still really wanted to learn Redux, but I looked into hooks and it was amazing. So that's what I've been using since then, basically. And do they do hooks? Are they teaching hooks in your boot camp as well?
We're actually about ready to learn them right now, as a matter of fact.
Okay. So you still start with the class components and the traditional way of doing things, and now you're going into hooks. Okay.
Exactly.
So that's good to know how to do it both ways. But but yeah, it was a great suggestion. But like hooks aren't on the free code camp curriculum, you know?
No.
So I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been talking with other developers on LinkedIn. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and then I know you just got a job, so congratulations.
Yes,
How's it
thank
been
you.
so far?
Well, every job is different. I hear
Yeah,
like
definitely.
like the job my husband got. I mean, I was learning from his experience a little bit, but my experience is totally different from his. Totally different company. I just this little startup that is is getting off the ground still, just trying to add new features, trying to put out new products still. So like in my husband's job, they have meetings every day, and they do unit and integration testing and all this stuff because it's a huge corporation. And this little startup, like, he's like, can you add this feature? Can you actually, we need a React Native app like right now. Can you get started on a React Native app from scratch by yourself? You know, I'm like, okay, I could do that, you know. so that so that's that I'd say is both a pro and a con. You know, the nice thing is that I actually get to build stuff and
Mm,
contribute in a meaningful way, versus in a large corporation you could feel like just a cog in the wheel, like what am I even doing here, you know. um, but the con is that I feel a lot of pressure to like do things really quickly, and just like no, I'm gonna do things right. I'm gonna take my time. I'm gonna plan it out. You know, you'll thank me later.
definitely. Having to learn how to set boundaries like real quick.
Exactly. And that's something developers are under all the time. There's the business needs, and then there's the reality of what it takes to actually develop something. And I think that's a constant tension, because business is like, do it now, do it. Who cares about it being perfect? Just get it out there. But the actual engineers are saying, you're going to regret this if we rush through it.
Mhm.
um, so, so that's the main thing that I've been going through. But what kind of work are you gonna look for, or what's your plan?
Well, I'm already starting to kind of, put my feelers out there and see what's happening. I feel like if I could find a way to combine my past musical experience with development, I would be a super happy kid. And I've seen maybe one or two companies out there so far who have been kind of looking for somebody who can, develop apps and games for music students. And actually, that was my first project for GA. Was I designed? It's not quite finished yet because I had a week to do it, but it's a game called Music with Mozart, and it's supposed to be sort of like a Simon Says matching game where you go up the levels and Mozart plays a song and then you copy it, and so we get audiation in there, and that's a lot of fun. Um, but honestly, I think I'd like to work for maybe a smaller company as well. Like something where I feel like I could be more of a contributor. I've worked in my past for a lot of kind of government oriented jobs since getting out of the teaching world. And I'm currently working for, kind of the financial side of things. And it seems like when you work with banking or insurance or anything like that, everything seems to be on fire all of the time.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to kind of take a step back and, have a moment to breathe and work with a really good team in a chill environment for a bit.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it depends on the team too.
Definitely.
Just some are more chill than others, I suppose. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's interesting. Music combining that sounds like a great game. You know, like with my kids, I always try when it's time to learn something, or I always look for apps like you're talking about.
Mhm.
The gamification of education is amazing, even for adults. Like I use Duolingo. I'm learning Spanish and some Italian just for fun on the side,
Yes.
and it's like playing a game. You know,
Yeah.
it's great.
I love Duolingo. That's a lot of fun.
Yep. And
Mhm.
they came out with an app for kids to learn how to read called Duo ABC, um, which they love to play. And yeah, so the gamification of education is gonna, I think it's gonna become more and more a thing. So that's really nice. My daughter is really into music, and she's found games that kind of like what you're talking about. They're not Mozart songs, they're more modern pop music songs, you know, but she has to I I don't know what she does. She has to like hit the right notes or something. I don't know. They're
Yeah.
gonna know more about this stuff than I do eventually. Just yeah. um, but where have you found these jobs that combine the education and or the music and the programming?
Kind of mostly digging around LinkedIn,
Mm.
checking out their jobs, um, sending out little searches for, like anything to have to do with software engineering, and it'll pull some up. And I just came across one randomly. I thought, dang, that is the coolest thing. Let's try and fly that way. We'll see what happens. I've got to learn a little more about sound sampling and things like that. But dang, it's so cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. Um, yeah. So do you feel like General Assembly is? I mean, I've known some graduates of General Assembly. I mean, it's all over the country, right? Do they help you? How do they help you with job placement and job search, or is there any help with that at all?
There is. Now I know there's ongoing after you graduate, and I'm not entirely sure what happens after that. But while you're going to school, you have an outcomes course. And for us, I'm in the remote flex program. So we meet as outcomes once every other week. And we go about how to write a resume, and we talk about how to write a cover letter. We do mock interviews, and we talk about how to properly search for a job and how to kind of discover, what industry you'd like to work in. And we use the analogy of, like, if you're a vegan, you probably wouldn't want to work for Purdue, maybe
Yeah.
something along those lines, and things like that. So we get a lot of guidance, and we talk about, how to be more of an online presence so that folks will be able to discover you more quickly.
Right. So have you been trying to, excuse me, have you been trying to be an online presence more, like on LinkedIn or Twitter or anything?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and I've written a couple of blogs, and one of them was fairly well received, which I thought was neat. I actually, this class is the reason I started writing blogs in general, because I always thought it was kind of silly when
Yeah.
I was alive when blogs first started happening. I'm like, well, who would ever read this? Like, who am I? And I kind of had to get over that. It would put me out of my comfort zone a little bit. And so I've been trying to post a little more. I did have a Facebook for a long time, but I cut that back in January because it was nonsense. So I'm trying to, like, overcome my, I guess, prejudices about some social media. And I'm thinking about getting on Twitter and possibly Instagram as well for,
Mhm.
professional reasons. So we'll see how that goes. I think it might help a little bit.
Yeah, it's been I did not understand Twitter for I mean, I understood the purpose of LinkedIn, you know,
Yeah.
especially since I knew I was going to be looking for a job as a professional platform and all that stuff. Um, but I started hearing stories about the development community on Twitter and how people have gotten jobs without even interviewing, just from people they knew. And I I finally, after so many people urged me, decided to see what was up, you know. And I didn't really understand what was the purpose of Twitter. Like, what am I supposed to even do on here or say?
Yes.
Really weird. um, and the way someone compared it was, uh, instead of it's like a continual cocktail party, basically, is how someone compared it. Like, LinkedIn is where you go with your business suit and you're handing out your business cards and such. And Twitter is where you're just standing around with your cocktail glass, exchanging witty remarks and chatting with whoever your fellows are. Um, so that was very interesting. Now Facebook, yeah, I don't I just use Facebook to post pictures of my kids to my friends and family, basically. I don't network on Facebook, really.
Yeah, it's a hot mess.
And then Instagram. Instagram is kind of like Twitter was for me. Like, what am I even supposed to do on there? You know, post pictures of my dogs that I don't have, you know. So I don't even know what I would do in terms of web development on Instagram. But the way to start is to check out Instagram pages from other developers and just see what they're doing. So I guess if I wanted to get into it, that would be the way to start, is to just observe and start to imitate, basically.
Definitely. Catch them in their native habitat.
Watch the developer as they post a photo of their latest project or whatever they post. Yep. Yeah, that's great. And then, so you've written some blogs. So what's the blog post that you said one of them has done pretty well? What was that about?
It's called On Learning to Code as a Visually Impaired Human.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I like the title. That's catchy.
Yeah. I was born with a visual impairment that renders me legally blind in both eyes, and I'm colorblind, and there's all sorts of fun issues that go along with that. And it's been interesting going through, like, this is such a visually oriented field, and ironically, I'm a visual learner, which is hilarious. But like trying to navigate through GA's courses as a person who's other abled visually has been interesting, and just going along that. So I kind of chronicled what exactly it is that affects me, and how I work through it and learn, and how I set up my tools so that I can learn better.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that would be a great blog. I could link that in this video whenever I post it, so that people can check it out. How does that sound?
Oh, that'd be fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, it's accessibility is one of those things that can be just brushed aside, but
Mm-hmm.
it's gaining in. It seems like people are talking about it more and more, so that's really nice. And in terms of design and
Yeah. We go over it a little bit in General Assembly. Like, of course, we talk about the semantic tags in HTML. And we had a little kind of masterclass with a UX UI teacher. And he talked about, things that you can do to make it more accessible. And I actually asked him point blank, I said, I am that colorblind person. Like, if you stick stuff on there at the wrong time, I'm not going to be able to tell the difference. And he said, one, focused on contrast, of course.
right.
And then, we talked about how to pick a color palette based on the color wheel, maybe like having complementary colors only, or having different shades of a single color, or picking 3 colors from the color wheel and just using those. And I thought those were really helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into design, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so is that something that you would find yourself focusing on? I mean, there's so many different areas you can focus on to become more specialized in web development. What area really draws you in, design, or like back of the front end, or the back end, or I mean, there's even just on the front end, there's so many different areas. But yeah, is there anything that stands out to you as something you'd really want to work with more?
I've loved working with React on the front end, actually. I'm fascinated by all of it, and I actually have a few courses on accessibility lined up after this, so I'm going to get deeper into that as well. But I've loved putting the front end of my sites together. I'm actually working on an application right now using Ruby on Rails and then React on the front end. Okay. And that's just create React app is, it's my heart. Just the scaffold, all the things.
My heart, you React.
I love doing that. And I do really love putting together the client side version of my website and figuring out how to put everything where it's supposed to go. It's like this kind of weird Rubik's Cube Jenga thing happening.
It's like rearranging furniture. It's like Yep.
I've got to do, I forgot to do it this week, but I'm starting to do a Throwback Thursday code thing where I post something that I've created in the past couple of years that's older, and I, like muse about how far I've come since then.
Yeah.
And this week coming up, I've got this really great web form. It's not hooked up to anything. It's just the pure client side version of the web form, and it's just, I think it's really cool. I'm excited to post it.
Great. Where do you post it, on LinkedIn or? Okay, great. We are connected because you messaged me. I don't know. LinkedIn is so funny what shows up in your feed and what doesn't. So I'll have to go to your profile and find your post, because I don't know if I've seen any in my feed. So that'll be nice to see that. I mean, I recommend doing it on Twitter too. And
oh yeah.
And actually, like, finding a niche. I mean, what's unique about you? Like, you already shared several things that are unique about you, but I think people would really find it fascinating about the accessibility and the visual impairment and everything. Not that you want to like exploit yourself, but in a certain way, like, yes, exploit yourself. Like, people would be really interested in this, so yeah, and that would be a good place to like post your blog article and everything. I've seen people talk about accessibility on Twitter, and so it is like a specialized area that people are interested in knowing about. So that's really great. Awesome. Throwback Thursday. I didn't know that was a thing. Is that a thing? Did other people do that too?
I know it's really heavy on my Facebook account. All the friends were like, oh, Throwback Thursday, this was me like 20 years ago. Shout out. So I was like, well, let me try that with code. Like, here's some like the, actually, not this previous week, but the one before it, I posted the very first thing I ever made. And I was so excited about it. It was, ironically, a tribute page from the Free Code Camp curriculum.
Right.
Beethoven.
Awesome. Yep. I did Stan Lee for mine.
Nice.
He's just so awesome. Like, I mean, he was such a happy guy. He just loved what he did all his life. He's always smiling. He started out as this just nobody. He just wanted to pay the bills, so he was just drawing these silly comics, and then he ends up as this billionaire hanging out with celebrities all the time. Like, he's a happy guy. I don't know.
I love that.
Oh, but Beethoven, yeah, Beethoven. So you're a visual learner who's visually impaired, and he was a deaf composer. I mean, what's going on here?
Right? Music soothes the soul.
It's like embracing, it's the epitome of embracing your weaknesses, not as weaknesses, as actually transforming them into strength somehow in a certain sense. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, awesome.
Definitely. I think I had some pretty decent hearing before I started teaching marching band.
Oh, no. Oh, you taught marching band too, huh?
I did. My home state is Idaho, actually, and I'm certified. Well, I was up until very recently certified K-12 music, and my first gig was K through 12, and I've taught bands, choirs, and my last teaching job I actually did have a marching band as well. And grad school, that's what I did too. I was a field graduate assistant for my college marching band.
Okay. Did you ever play in band yourself, or what did
Oh,
you?
yes.
What did you play in band?
My main is clarinet.
Okay, I would have said either clarinet or flute.
Oh, yes.
I did well in concert band. I played bass clarinet. I loved bass clarinet.
Yes.
But they didn't march bass clarinets in my marching band in high school, so I took up sousaphone.
Well done.
Sousaphone, yes.
That's quite a switch.
But that's the thing is, that was a pattern, at least in my school, is that there weren't many sousaphone players, so they always were grabbing people from other sections to learn how to play it. Like, there was a flute player who became a sousaphone, and there was a saxophone player who became a sousaphone, and anyway, there's just like one native sousaphone player. And you know what? Now I'm going to tie that in with web development, because that's
Yes.
kind of what's happening. Like, there's only a few people who started out in web development and like knew since they were young that that's what they wanted to do. The rest of us are switchers, you know,
Mm.
who stumbled upon it later on, like, hey, wait a minute, this looks pretty cool actually, or this first thing I chose isn't working out for me for some reason. So what else can I do?
Yeah.
So I tied it in. There we go.
Yeah. Gosh, I was just thinking back to like in school, I grew up in a very rural part of Idaho. And I was thinking back to like my junior high and high school computer lab. And like we had a very small selection of computer courses, and I just kind of automatically assumed you had to be like a super math genius to do it. And at the time I was not feeling strong in math, which is ironic because like I think I posted earlier on LinkedIn, I was like, me in high school, I'm terrible at math. Me as an adult, the time and space complexity of the following formula is O of n for the following reasons.
Yes. I still am weak in math. Like, whenever there's something that has to do with math in programming, I always look up someone else who's figured it out. You know, like anything that has to do with the date, converting the date, or different math operators and such. I'm just like, I know someone else has already figured it out, so I'm not going to sit here and torture myself. I'll just find their code and use it.
Amen.
Actually. And both my sister and my mom were the same way. Like, neither of them were into math. They were much more in, like, my sister was more into, she was into music as well. And then later on she switched to like English. But she didn't like how, in terms of like her English major, she did not like how subjective everything was.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And she took one computer course and she fell in love. And it's like she sits there with her program and it either works or it doesn't, you know, and she has to figure out how to make it work. Not subjective. I suppose there are subjective areas. A lot of people would say design is very subjective, but there really are standards and guidelines that you can learn and and figure out. It's not just, oh, what's my favorite color kind of thing. um, So yeah, interesting. So have you gotten into, so you're colorblind, you said?
Mm-hmm.
So have you gotten into, how does that work? Have you learned about color theory and like the purpose of different colors that you use for different things and such?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to, do you have to find someone else to help you choose the color or something? How does that work?
Yeah, and that's been like the ongoing struggle. Actually, the cool thing is, and if you read my blog, I explain a little bit about it. I filter the light through these red tinted color contact lenses.
Oh.
So there is some color perception there, but I don't know if it's on par with what like a normally sighted human would see. And so what I do, I love the way design and color research affects the brain. And so I do understand what some of the colors do for you.
Mhm.
And so I've tried to incorporate that a lot when I make websites. And the really funny thing is my husband is a painter. he's been an industrial painter for like most of his life, and he's very good at hues and colors, and so sometimes if I'm having a real struggle, like, does this really go with this, I'll be like, help. He'll come check it out for me.
Yeah. I'm the same way. Yeah, I'm a little too immune to, I'm not color blind, I'm like color immune. I don't know, I just made that up, but I I love bright colors.
Mhm.
And so I'll come up with a design and a color scheme that makes me happy, and then give someone else a headache.
Yes.
So
Definitely.
I do the same thing with my husband. I'm like, I grab him, I'm like, how does this look? He's like, I'm going cross-eyed right now.
My brain. Yeah.
Got bright green and bright blue, and there's not enough contrast and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, but it's so pretty.
Oh, right. Definitely. I always have trouble like perceiving between like blue and green. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of tough. Like, I had a thing in my hand the other day, and I'm like musing on the fact that, with my contacts in, it looks so much different than, without my contacts in.
Hmm.
And I assumed that the thing in my hand was very, very blue. And my husband's like, no, it's green. Gross.
So how does that work? I mean, just like walking around outside, because you have the green trees and the blue sky, do you have trouble distinguishing between like the trees and the sky, or does the
It's all
lighting
about
help?
the hue of the
Okay.
thing. Yeah. And it depends on how healthy the grass and the trees are. And the funny thing is, I actually noticed it quite a lot living in Louisiana during his previous tour, I guess. Louisiana is very green, and I growing up in southern Idaho, things were not green on that level, and so it was really cool to actually physically see that in the summertime. Like, wow, everything's thriving. And sky blue is kind of a tough color. It's it like it changes a bit the closer you get to the surface. And the higher up you go, it is a little bluer and things like that. But I could, if it were taken out of context, I could easily mistake it for something else.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat, man. But yeah, it's nice having a friend you can grab to check your design before punishing the world with it is very nice.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. Did you have other questions you wanted to get into, or?
I think we've covered quite a lot of it. Let me just check
Great.
my time here. No, we're
Yeah,
still.
because half an hour. I mean, half an hour actually is pretty nice for a talk.
Yeah.
I did an hour video. I did a live stream video last night for the first time, and it was an hour, and it was great. Like, it talked about some great things, but it was starting to get kind of long. I was starting to get kind of tired.
Oh yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, but well, so it's Saturday. So do you use today to do a bunch of coding, or what do you usually? What's your coding schedule like?
Actually, on Saturdays, here in about 30 minutes, I'm going to actually start my class, and we go from 10 a.m. Eastern Time to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's
Oh,
all of the coding.
right, because you're not in the immersive, you're in the flex. So that's
Mhm,
like Tuesday and Thursday evenings
mhm.
and Saturday mornings. I looked into doing a boot camp. Like, I wanted to do one really bad,
Yeah.
um, for the structure and the help, all that stuff. Um, but I was already doing pretty well teaching myself, so I decided to just save the money and just keep going with it, basically.
Look at
Uh,
that.
so that's great. But yeah, do you have a Twitter account, or is that something you still need to set up? Because I could look for you in there too.
I've still got to set that up. That's probably going to be like on my to-do list this evening after we get out of classes. I'm just going to bite the bullet and do it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, wait, okay. So when you do, send me your Twitter handle, and also send me a link to your blog post we talked about, and I can put that up on the description. And yeah, this has been really fun talking to you. I read your about section in LinkedIn, and I'm like, this is probably a kindred spirit, just
Yes. That
you,
was another thing I loved about becoming a programmer or an engineer, was that everything I saw had an element of fun and silliness to it, and I'd been put in a box for a very long time, and I feel like now I can let myself out a bit more.
yeah, and that's kind of how I feel on Twitter too. Is like, you can just joke around more than you can on LinkedIn. So you can talk about tech stuff and programming stuff and network too, but you can also just throw out a random joke or a random meme or something that just makes people laugh, and it's kind of fun. So awesome.
Well,
Well,
I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. This has been incredible. As I'm reaching out and trying to find, fellow programmers and techies to kind of, learn from. So
yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad we chatted this morning. This is really fun. And I look forward to following your journey, and I hope you find the dream job of making music apps and combining the two things you love. It would be very awesome.